Let's say for the sake of discussion, you are the designated car guy in your group of friends. That same group always includes the guy that's sort of into cars but not so much, has a couple of bucks. He comes to you and he says, I want something fast, I want something fun, but most importantly, I want a convertible. Depending on age, you send them usually in two directions, a Corvette or a 911. And you would be forgetting a name that's been around for a very long time, and as of late, absolutely wants to change the party. Okay, so what would be that third suggestion? A Mercedes-Benz SL. Remember that? It's been around since, what, the mid-50s. It started as a sports car, race car kind of thing, and then morphed into a small grand touring convertible that ushered in the safety era. No, not Volvo, the Mercedes-Benz SL, the second generation. And then it turned into the Panzerwagen, and then it turned into something that was more of a GT car that was softer, kind of like the Fat Elvis. And it's been the Fat Elvis for a couple of years. Then they introduced something called the AMG GT, and that, well, that was something that was a bit more along the lines of a 911 and was very credible in its freshman effort. And the biggest learning from that exercise was the concept of a very strong structure. No, it doesn't have the same platform from the previous generation of GT. This is an all-new platform, and it is specific to the SL. That's where we come to this being on offer in two different flavors. The AMG SL63, which we already drove about a year and a half ago, and this, the SL55. What's the difference? Well, not the engine. They both have a 4-liter twin turbocharged hand-built AMG engine, but the output is different. This is tuned to less than the SL63. It's about 100 horsepower less and 74 pounds of torque less. But most importantly, both of them are only on offer as all-wheel drive. With an engine that's mounted somewhat behind the front axle, has netted an SL that is now, at least dynamically, very credible. It's more than a GT car and slightly less than a sports car. But that was the SL63. This is supposed to be the lesser car, but not from a design perspective. Looking at the two, they look almost identical, especially this one that has a lot of factory dress-up options. But performance figures, that's where we see a difference. That SL63 that we drove a year and a half ago, 0 to 60 was very capable at 3.5 seconds. This is much slower at 3.8 seconds. VMAX on that SL63 was 196 miles an hour. This becomes the tortoise in the race. This is 183 miles an hour. But the good news, the fuel economy, abysmal in both. 14, 21, 16 combined. Okay, so we already know the good news. That's a detuned version of the same engine that's in the SL63. The bad news, it's about the same weight. Maybe about 20, 30 pounds lighter. 4,134 pounds, or depending on express your weights and measures, 1,875 kilograms. With that, race mode. Oh yeah, oh! The delivery of power was interesting there. If you notice, it took a little bit to spool up there, but once it did, I really cannot tell the difference in the delivery of power between this and an SL63. God, this is an incredibly fast car. Then there's that transmission, and here it's the same 9-speed, but it's not like other Mercedes where it's a torque converter automatic. It's a wet multi-plate clutch, and here there is a noticeable difference in personality than the previous SL. Here it's so much more. Immediate is not the right term to describe it. This, it's like driving around with your hair on fire in the most basic new AMG SL. I'm kind of taking that there really isn't that big of a difference in terms of delivering power between these two. So in our SL63 episode, there were a chorus of what I call wonderful whiners. People that like to complain but have no solution. How could an SL be all-wheel drive? Or that's too much like a GT, there's no differentiation. And most importantly, how could an SL have a soft top? Well, in this case, This is how. It's a new top design that is a Z shape in the way it folds, and the logic is to make it slimmer when it's packaged inside the car. Now there is an added benefit. One, I would argue, is significantly more important than how tall the top mechanism is when folded, and that is lower weight high in the car. Now granted, we've determined this is what, 4,200 pounds, so we're not trying to make it a lightweight car, we're trying to focus on that structure and letting it do its job. You see, by keeping the weight low in the car, we get a lower center of gravity. That's all fine and good, but there was a lot of work done to the suspension here. This is not an air ride. That's why it doesn't weigh 5,000 pounds. This is a hydraulic suspension, so this is good old-fashioned chassis tuning that's combined with that stronger structure. So the added benefit of having lower weight high in the car makes the suspension do what it's designed to do. Then there's another aspect that there were complaints about: the back seat. Why should an SL have a back seat? Many commented in the SL63 episode. Here I would agree. It's useless. It is a parcel shelf. That's about it. But in reality, it's there because insurers know, for some reason, by having a back seat that's useless, it lowers the insurance of this, a very complex car. And then there's the reality of the design of the roof. I would argue this is something that is very subjective. I much prefer a canvas roof, especially one in a contrasting color like this. Starling blue with a cognac interior would have looked much better with a cognac top. The black is too much. But if you were to see the contrast, you would see the design, at least what the designers were going for, with the soft top. So as you and I press on to driving dynamics, there's once again good news and there's bad news. The good news is this is fitted with active roll stabilization, and all the other Porsches and AMGs and BMWs we've driven with such a system, fantastic. However, the bad news is that was not the point of this exercise. The point of this exercise was to differentiate between the suspension setup in the SL63 that we've already driven and this, because if I'm really pressed at this point, the delivery of power, there's no difference. These two are incredibly fast cars. I think you'd probably have to take this to a racetrack to understand the difference between the two in terms of delivering power. But in terms of driving dynamics, the suspension setup on the basic SL55 is different than in the SL63. This one has the active roll stabilization, which is part of a package, and that in turn makes the two cars virtually identical. And you see, here's the thing about that active roll stabilization system. It negates any complaining about the almost 4,200 pounds this car is. And that brings this discussion really to theory rather than performance. What are they going for here in setting this car up? It's magnificent. It's unusually good. This isn't quite to the level of the current or what we'd call the previous gen GT, but it's much closer to it than an SL was. It's actually light years ahead. So that would tell us two things. Number one, they're trying to make this a harder, a stiffer, a different tool. And number two, this is clearly a message von Stuttgart saying we are moving our performance ambitions to a higher level. Or one could look at it in a very different light and saying we're actually moving our performance ambitions backwards to when the SL was originally introduced. And when we refer to that generation, not the car that was commercialized by Maxie Hoffman in New York, rather the race car on which it was based. Either way, I have to say this far exceeds my expectations. It's planted in the ass and it is good. Yes, it is indeed that time again to play your favorite game, Mind the Options game, with today's contestant, a Mercedes-Benz SL. Frankly, I did not see coming. This, the SL55, for a base price of $137,400. First thing we add is that stunning color, starling blue, for, believe it or not, only $750. I would say that is a bargain. Then we add the sienna brown and black two-tone Napa leather interior. That, believe it or not, is no charge. The one thing I would definitely change on this is that black top. It is just the wrong color. Then we press on to the AMG Dark Chrome package. That's not really chrome. It's on the dashboard. It looks more like a bronze, $750. Then the AMG Night package. Here, there is a specific difference here. Look at the A-pillar. That's black in addition to the mirrors and all the other bits. I don't think I would do that, $750. Then the augmented video for the navigation. This is a big thing with Mercedes, which brings us to a prudent question. Why is this optional on an almost $140,000 car for $350? Then the AMG Track app, that's $250. Then the black microfiber headliner. That is a stunning complement to that cognac interior and the starling blue exterior. Well worth it at $1,600, although I would ask for a choice of colors. Then that MBUX interior assistant. That's optional for $350. What's with it with a $140,000 car, nickel and diming you? Then we get to the Driver's Assistance 2 package. That is the Level 2 autonomy. No, this is not a self-driving car, $1,950. Then we get to an incredibly important option. There is the Performance package. Now that adds things like a front axle lift, limited slip differential, some bits on the interior, but most importantly, it adds the active roll stabilization, which to my mind makes it an SL63, and it does add a lot of money, $7,300. Then you bought a fast car, or at least your friend in your group bought a fast car. So your friend needs to be punished by the US government for $1,300 gas guzzler tax. Then the only thing we pay extra for is the destination, Henning von Bremen, Deutschland, for $1,050, which brings us to a total retail price of $153,850. Put another way, about the same price as what Mercedes thinks this competes with, and that would be a pretty well-equipped Targa Carrera S. So yes, the general theme of this interior has been lifted from the W223 S-Class, but that screen has been adapted for a convertible. Think about the logic here. We've got the top down, it's a beautiful sunshiny day. If the screen is fixed, you won't be able to see anything or really do anything, being it's all haptic feedback because of the glare. So what we saw in the SL63, they have a button that adjusted the angle of the screen. There basically was two positions. There was here and there was here. But obviously, one of the benefits I gather of over-the-air updates or this kind of system is you can change that on the fly, and they've done that. So it's got the same button here, but instead of moving, it has this display angle toggle, and look at how far the thing comes forward. It's like a completely different design almost. And I have to say, this looks goofy, and you would think it would get in your way, but the glare is almost completely gone. I could probably even show you one of the party tricks here. Mercedes has a partnership with IWC, and there, the onboard clock is like an IWC chronograph. This truly magnificent to look at. Granted, I would prefer a real clock there. But at the end of the day, this is a pretty sizable change, and my guess is this came from real-world learning and feedback from owners, and this is one of the things they changed on the fly. I would love to see this, like, go away. Maybe slide down and think about how sexy, or really old world the interior would be with this completely gone. And if you think about it, most of the stuff being operated through the steering wheel controls and the head-up display, you could probably operate the car on a long-distance trip without it, and thus have this big open expanse. Okay, so what have we learned today? This completely reimagined. Now that I've spent a lot more time with it and understand how big of a deal the change in the structure and how much work has been done to the suspension to make this do what it does, that leads me to question not only the coming GT, but the pace of change in segments that are not EVs and crossovers. Need proof? Take a look at what's driving around our roads today compared to 20 years ago. In this segment, 20 years ago, all of the options were, yes, slower, but much softer, which tells us either this segment is getting smaller or the people that buy these things are changing. Either way, that brings us to the wish list. And here I have two things. Number one, I'd like a hell of a lot of delta between this and the coming GT, which means I'm looking for GT3 levels of performance. And number two, something we discussed in our Maybach EQS 680 SUV episode. Wow, that is a mouthful. IWC gauges, at least the option of them in that a very expensive car. This will not be as expensive as that, but at 153 grand, it ain't cheap. So how about getting IWC to make analog gauges for this, something that is otherwise stunning to look at? That would not only be a design triumph, it would also be a very high take rate option. But I am one man, and this is the point of the episode that I turn around to you guys to opine in the comments below or via our social media, MotoManTV, all one word, MotoManTV, all one word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you got value out of this episode, I would greatly appreciate you sharing them with all your friends on your socials and doing all the YouTube business, subscribing, click notifications, and like. Until I see you in the next episode, bis später.